Yah, Vayili Lishua. The Lord is my strength and my song. He was salvation to me. A good Shabbos, my holy sisters and brothers. What a beautiful version of Ozi V'Zimrat Yah. That's from Joey Farber and his congregation. We say those words. A lot of people just kind of run over them in the daily prayers as we're preparing to say the Amidah, the standing prayer. But I love that melody, and especially when I'm praying alone, I will just pause on those few words. The Lord is my strength and song, His salvation to me. We're referring to when God took us out of Egypt and parted the sea for us and then drowned our oppressors in it and saved us, and then we were good. Like, we weren't Pharaoh and his army wasn't going to catch us and kill us and drag us back to Egypt. And it's that beautiful sense of liberation. And, it's so related to Passover, obviously. We're studying the laws of Passover now. But I really encourage people that when you pray, your daily prayer, your prayer session, and you want to, even if you're not praying daily, you want to have a time every day where you check in with God. And if you are using the prayer book, sometimes we're just running through so many different prayers and making sure we fulfill our obligations and saying them. But when a few words on the page call out to you, so pause, sink in. That phrase that called out to you, it's a window. It's a window that's opening just for you. Take a moment. And it's your soul, having that strong urge to unite with the source of all souls. Let's light up the darkness. The candle's getting pretty short, right? That means that I talked a lot this week. I usually start a new candle on Saturday night, and so it burns, the wisdom candle, it burns all week. And if I'm running long, day after day, so then by Friday, it's kind of a little candle. It's a reminder to me. I'll try to keep today's class a little bit more efficient and keep it moving. All right, where are we? Well, first of all, today's accidental Talmud is daily, is dedicated. We got a couple dedications. Spencer Ehrman is dedicating today's learning to the refuah shlema, the healing, complete and speedy, of Shalom Lezer ben Esther. May Shalom Lezer ben Esther have a complete healing of body, mind, spirit. May it be a speedy recovery. And we say amen. And thank you, Spencer, for the donation and the dedication. Also, we have a dedication from Yehuda Sobel, who is with us in our daily class, I think every day. Yehuda is dedicating today's class to the memory of her daughter, Avigail Rivka Bat Yehuda Chaya. May Avigail Rivka's neshama, her soul, have a great aliyah, a great elevation in the world of souls to the highest levels of heaven. May our learning today propel her even higher. And Yehuda Sobel, we're all sending you a really big hug. It's can't be easy to even hear these words dedicating to the memory of a lost daughter. So we're really with you, and we hope that today's learning can give her even just a little bit more of an, make her even higher. She's already so high up in heaven, and may she go up even a little higher in the merit of today's learning. And thank you for your dedication. We are on Daf Yud Gimel, page 13 of Tractate Pesachim, the fourth volume of the Talmud, the laws of Passover. We are discussing the fourth Mishna in the first chapter of Pesachim. And let's just get into it because I'm promising we're going to keep it efficient. Okay. Everything's always a little verklempt on Fridays. It's the only day of the week when we go at noon with the class. Of course, we're getting ready for Shabbos, and it's so early. This is in fact the earliest Shabbos of the year. Candle lighting here, I think, is 4:25. So everything's crunched on Friday. I will note that tomorrow, December 5th, on the solar calendar, now this is the only date in the Jewish calendar that is tied to a date on the solar calendar, right? So the Hebrew calendar is a lunar calendar. They're lunar months. All the Hebrew months begin on the new moon. And so 7 out of every 19 years, we have to add a whole other month so that we keep in the spring, summer, fall, winter cycle, and we don't fall out of cycle that, a spring holiday like Passover has to remain in the spring, and that's why we add a month to the lunar calendar. But there's one date every year where we change over from saying in our daily prayer in the Amidah 3 times a day, we ask God to grant blessing this year. We say that during the summer. And then in the winter, we say, please grant dew and a blessing. Talumatar as a blessing. Talumatar, so he should grant dew and a blessing. And we say that in the winter months. And the changeover happens in the evening service. Before, in some prayer books it says on the evening before December 5th, so that would be tonight on December 4th, and in the year preceding a leap year on the evening of December 5th, but then over time it changes to the 5th and the 6th. I just looked it up, so it's gonna change over is gonna be tomorrow, not tonight. And I'll publish an article later about why it's tied that way. It's so interesting. I mean, it really is tied to the seasons and not to the rest of the Hebrew calendar. But there's a lot of math involved, so I'll just share an article. But I'll just note that we switch over to Talumatar tomorrow night, not tonight. If I'm wrong about that, someone let me know. But I looked it up on a couple of different websites, and they said it's tomorrow. Okay. So in our Mishnah, we've seen that in terms of how late on the 14th of Nisan, which is the day before Passover starts, right? So now we're in ancient Israel, like draw the picture, you've made the pilgrimage, you're in Jerusalem with your family and other people, you've registered. In other words, the group of you brought a paschal offering, either a lamb or a goat. You cleared out your house. Now you've also cleared out your hotel of chametz. You did the search the night before on the night of the 14th. Now on the morning of the 14th, we're permitted to eat chametz until when? That's what we've been discussing. We know that it's going to be prohibited in the afternoon, because in the afternoon, that's the time to slaughter the Pesach offering, the Paschal offering, either the lamb or the goat. And when we're slaughtering the offering, for sure, chametz, leavened bread, is no longer permitted. So since it's not permitted in the afternoon, so at the beginning of the 7th hour, the first hour after noon, is when you would expect that we would burn the chametz, but the sages built in a little safety buffer. So we actually burn it at the beginning of the 6th hour, right? So if the hours were all actually 60 minutes long, it would be at 11 a.m. And in the springtime, it's approximately like that. So at about just the beginning, a little after 11 a.m., more or less, is when we would burn the chametz. So Rabbi Meir in our Mishna said, okay, but we could eat the chametz in the 5th hour. That would be from like 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. And Rabbi Yehuda said, no, we can eat it in the 4th hour, from like 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. more or less. And then in that 5th hour, from 10 to 11, it's in abeyance. We don't do anything with it. We don't eat it, we don't burn it, and then everyone agrees that we burn it a little after 11 a.m. So the disagreement between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda was when is the last time that we eat leavened bread? On the morning before Passover starts that night. Rabbi Meir said through the 5th hour. Rabbi Yehuda said only through the 4th hour. And then we have this 1 hour buffer where we neither eat nor burn. On today's daf, Rav Nachman rules in the name of Rav. The halacha, the law, accords with Rabbi Yehuda, right? So Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda disagree. Very often, the law is like Rabbi Meir. Very often, it's not even attributed to Rabbi Meir because he got himself in trouble with the chief rabbi of his time. But the fact is, usually it's with Rabbi Meir. But here, the law is going to accord with Rabbi Yehuda. Says Rav Nachman in the name of Rav. Rava says to Rav Nachman, wait a minute. You're saying that the law accords with Rabbi Yehuda and that we can only eat chametz on the morning of the 14th through the 4th hour and we don't eat through the 5th hour. But that ruling seems to contradict another Mishnah that we've got. And we see whenever one Mishnah contradicts another, the sages definitely have a problem. They have to figure out why they seem to contradict each other and reconcile the apparent contradiction. So what is this Mishnah that seems to contradict this ruling that the law accords with Rabbi Yehuda, that we only eat chametz on the morning of the 14th through the 4th hour? This is a Mishnah that actually comes later in our tractate in Pesachim on page 21a, Chaf Aleph Amud Aleph. So on that page, 21a, it says that the entire time that one is permitted to eat chametz, he may feed chametz, leavened bread products, to his animal, right? When he's allowed, when a Jew is allowed to eat the chametz, he may also feed it to his animal. And the way it says is he is permitted to, as long as one is permitted to eat chametz, he feeds it to his animal also. And therefore, that Mishnah must accord with Rabbi Meir. In other words, it's support for Rabbi Meir's position because over there, it says that according to Rabbi Yehuda, in the 5th hour, we don't eat chametz, but we may feed it to the animal. That's over there in that Mishnah. So since that Mishnah says there's that the Mishnah over there, it seems to be the majority, the unattributed opinion, meaning the majority opinion, which disagrees with Rabbi Yehuda. Over there, Rabbi Yehuda says, like here, during the 5th hour, a person may not eat, but he can feed to his animal. Over there, it says during the 5th, over there, it says that any time that you can feed to the animal, you can eat, right? So it would seem to support Rabbi Meir's position here that we eat through the 5th hour and then burn at the beginning of the 6th. And there is no hour where we're not eating or burning because as long as you can eat, you can feed the animals like that. So the Gemara says, no. What that Mishnah over there is saying is that it's in accord with our Mishnah here with respect to the third opinion that's listed in our Mishnah. So Rabbi Meir says we can eat through the 5th hour. Rabbi Yehuda says we can only eat chametz through the 4th hour. But Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says we can only eat through the 4th hour, but if there's teruma, remember, is that set aside food, a tithe for the priest, the first tithe. Right, so when we create bread and we take challah from it, that's actually not teruma, but it is set aside for the priest. But when we harvest grain, the very first 2% is set aside for the priest, and it becomes consecrated, and only a priest can eat it. Right, and so it has to be maintained in a state of purity, of tahara, of ritual purity, so that the priest can eat it. It's set aside for the priest, and has to be maintained in a state of ritual purity so that the priest will be able to eat it. With respect to this teruma, we don't burn it early, but we may eat it during that 5th hour. So says Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, normal people, we don't eat. Oh, actually, it doesn't address that. The way it puts it in the Mishnah, it just says Rabban Gamliel says, it's not Shimon ben Gamliel, it's Gamliel. Rabban Gamliel says that the times are divided differently. Non-sacred foods are eaten the entire 4th hour, and teruma may be eaten during the entire 5th hour. Since it is a mitzvah to eat teruma and burning it is prohibited, additional time was allocated for its consumption, and one burns all leaven at the beginning of the 6th hour. So it seems that Rabban Gamliel agrees with Rabbi Yehuda that the normal people, non-priests, only eat chametz through the 4th hour. But the teruma is set aside for the priests, and we don't want to limit their time when they could eat it. So if a priest comes along and wants to eat teruma, that which happens to be chametz, not all teruma is chametz, but this teruma, which is chametz, the priest can still eat in the 5th hour, but we can't eat our chametz in the 5th hour, according to this opinion of Rabban Gamliel. So that's what that other Mishnah is saying, that that as long as someone is permitted to eat chametz, i.e. a priest, people can feed their chametz, their non-sacred chametz, to animals. So that would indicate that there is this hour-long period when we cannot eat chametz, but we're still going to be allowed to feed it to our animals. It's a way to sort of get rid of the chametz or use up the chametz, as it were, while it's still permitted not to us, but to the animals. Why is it permitted to the animals? Because during that hour, teruma is still permitted to the priests. So Rava answers, okay, well, if that's the case, let us say that the halacha accords with Rabban Gamliel. Why are we saying that the law accords with Rav Yehuda? It seems like, well, there was an opinion by Rabbi Meir, there was an opinion by Rabbi Yehuda, and then comes Rabban Gamliel, the third opinion, and he's the decisor, right? So there was a dispute between these two, and the third opinion, sometimes the third opinion takes a little bit from this and a little bit from that, and basically says, well, the majority agreed with this part of the first ruling and that part of the second ruling, and so therefore this is the law. But that's not what's happening here. Here, the third opinion is actually offering up a new detail. It doesn't come to decide between the first two opinions. It comes to add, another ruling and some more information as we're figuring out what the law is ultimately going to be. And that's what Rav Nachman says to Rava, right? So Rabban Gamliel is not the decisor here. He's just bringing his own third opinion. And this halacha, this law that Rav says accords with Rabbi Yehuda, it also accords with the unnamed Tana, meaning it's an unattributed Mishnah, so it should be the majority opinion and it should be the law, in another Mishnah. And that other Mishnah said that when the 14th of Nisan, again, we're talking about Erev Pesach, the eve of Passover, the day before Passover. There's always a little bit of confusion. I mentioned this before. I'm just going to say it one more time to be clear. Dates in the Hebrew calendar begin the night before. So the 15th of Nisan, which is when Passover is, begins on the night before, right? So the day of the 15th of Nisan and the night of the 15th of Nisan, the night of the 15th of Nisan comes before the day. So when we say Erev Pesach, the eve of Pesach, we don't mean the night of Passover, the night of the 15th. We mean the day before. So it would be the total night before, the night of the 14th, which is totally a night before. And then that morning is also called Erev Pesach. We get confused because when we say the eve of in English, it's kind of like it doesn't line up with the way Hebrew works and the Hebrew calendar. At any rate, when the 14th of Nisan, the day before Passover, falls on Shabbos. Now, we've been studying that you search out your house on the night of the 14th, and then you can still eat chametz on the morning of the 14th, and then at midday, or an hour early because of the buffer that they built in, we remove the chametz from our possession, often by burning. It's not necessarily by burning, but usually by burning. And we do that on the 14th of Nisan. Now, we know that we're not going to burn, we're not going to create a fire on Shabbos, right? I mean, there's some discussion about that, whether a fire can ever be kindled on Shabbos, but basically we're going to avoid doing that. So when Erev Shabbos falls on the 14th, we're going to do the removal of chametz one day early, on the 13th of the Hebrew month of Nisan. So if we do that, we searched out all our houses, we removed it from our houses, and then we'll burn it all and get rid of the chametz, the leavened bread, on the 13th so that we don't burn it on Shabbos. But even though we've burned all of it, we're going to leave some of it aside because on the 14th, we're still permitted to eat chametz. and we want to delight in Shabbos and have a challah and have the goodness and fun and tastiness that comes with leavened bread. So we're going to leave aside chametz carefully so we don't make crumbs in our house. For 2 meals of Shabbos. We're going to leave aside chametz, leavened bread, for Friday night and Saturday morning. Now, on Saturday morning, we still have this limit per Rabbi Yehuda, that we want to be done eating chametz by the 4th hour. So we're going to have an early Shabbos lunch, right? We're going to have our Shabbos lunch by that 4th hour, like between 10 and 11, between 9 and 10 a.m., right? We want to have that meal done by the end of the 4th hour on Shabbos. So we leave aside chametz that we got rid of on the 13th and enough for 2 meals on Shabbos. Now we've just made this distinction between regular chametz and teruma, consecrated food set aside for a priest. Now, we're seeing that the reason we allow eating of the teruma to go a little later than the regular chametz is because it's holy food, and we don't want to limit the amount of time that's available for a priest to eat food that's consecrated for his use and his use alone. So then on the 13th, right, on Friday, when we're leaving aside some of this chametz, if we happen to have teruma in our possession, which is only for the use of a priest, we ask ourselves, is there going to be a priest who's going to be able to eat this on Shabbos? If there is, okay, we'll set aside enough for 2 meals for the priest. But if there's not going to be a priest available to eat that chametz, which is consecrated chametz, teruma, then we're going to burn that on Friday. Now, this is the ruling of Rabbi Elazar ben Yehuda of Bartota in the name of Rabbi Yehoshua. The sage is going to be very careful and very reluctant to burn consecrated food. But in this situation, we're not going to be able to burn it on Shabbos, and there's not going to be a priest available to eat it. So even though this teruma is tahor, it hasn't been made impure, through contact with a person that came into contact with a corpse or something like that, in which case it would be disqualified. The priest couldn't eat it anyway, and we would be much quicker to burn it. But it's teruma, consecrated chametz in a pure state. It should be there for a priest. There is no priest to eat it, so we're going to burn it on Friday before Shabbos begins, even though this is the 13th of Nisan and not the 14th. The sages say, whoa. We really don't want to burn teruma, consecrated food that's in a pure state. So why don't we just put it aside enough for 2 meals? Because maybe on Shabbos, we will find a priest who can eat it. So they answer, well, we already looked for a priest. We looked for a priest. That's why we said there's no priest. We looked for a priest. So the Gemara answers, or the sages who were there arguing with Rabbi Elazar ben Yehuda in the name of Rabbi Yehoshua, the sages who were arguing with him, say, well, maybe we didn't find the priest, but there is a priest who's sleeping outside the city wall because of his journey. He didn't get close enough to the city to enter the city, but on Shabbos, he is close enough so that he's going to be able to walk into the city, and then he's going to appear on Shabbos walking in, and we can feed him that teruma. That might happen. So they answer, hold on a second, I want to read this to you. So he said to the sages, right? Rabbi Elazar ben Yehuda of Bartota said to the sages, according to your statement, that you take into account this unlikely scenario, one should not even burn teruma in abeyance, right? You should not even burn teruma when it's not Shabbos, because this teruma that you've been holding that became impure because somebody touched a corpse and then he touched it, so the priest can't eat it, and we're just holding on to it because it was consecrated. The priest can't eat it, but neither can we. So we're just holding on to it to burn it. But according to your thing, where unlikely scenarios have to be taken into account, we shouldn't even burn that, because perhaps Elijah the prophet will come on Shabbos and establish prophetically that the teruma is actually not impure, that it is not tameh, that it actually is tahor, it is pure, and it is fit for a priest to eat, right? So he's saying, like, you're going to take unlikely scenarios into account. So maybe Elijah will come. Now, when does Elijah come? Elijah is the prophet who's going to come the day before the Messiah comes to redeem the whole world, right? So we have a tradition that the prophet Elijah will come to announce the great and awesome day of the Lord when the Messiah is coming and will enter the Messianic age and the whole world will be transformed like that, right? So we're actually going to hear about it one day in advance when the prophet Elijah comes to tell the world that the Messiah is coming the next day, right? And when Elijah comes, the sages of the Talmud also have a tradition that he's going to answer immediately, and he could, perhaps, Elijah can be everywhere at once, and he's going to answer all our questions that we're not sure about, right? And even specific questions, not like questions of law that were left undecided, but even specific questions that people might have, like, well, I think that this chametz, this loaf of bread right here, is tameh. Because somebody touched it who had previously come into contact with a human corpse. And Elijah will sort of appear suddenly at my door and say, whoa, 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 don't throw away that loaf of bread because the person you think touched it didn't touch it. He came near it, but he didn't touch it. So that bread is pure. So just in case that's going to happen, maybe we shouldn't burn that bread. So obviously they're being ridiculous, right? They're saying that this idea that we shouldn't burn this teruma because a priest might show up out of nowhere tomorrow, it's so unlikely that it shouldn't be factored into how we're going to deal, on a normal basis with consecrated bread when the 14th of Nisan falls on Shabbos. And they said to him, they didn't answer him, well, maybe you're right, we shouldn't deal with that. That's a little bit too unlikely. What they said to him is, no, don't worry. Elijah will not arrive on Shabbos. They said to him that possibility is no source of concern, as the Jewish people have already been assured that Elijah will come neither on a Friday nor on the eve of a festival due to the exertion involved in preparing for the upcoming holy day. Right? So we have a tradition that Elijah will not come on a Friday because the Jews are so busy getting ready for Shabbos that Elijah won't come on a Friday. And likewise, he won't come on Erev Yom Tov, right? So he won't come on the eve of a festival. And since we're saying that the 14th of Nisan in this situation that we're talking about comes on the 14th of Nisan comes on Shabbos. So the 14th of Nisan is Erev Pesach, the eve of Passover. We're concerned what happens when it comes on Shabbos, but we don't have to worry about it because Elijah will not come neither on Friday nor on the eve of a holiday because the Jews are so busy getting ready, to welcome the divine presence and to be with God. And so the Messiah won't trouble us to send Elijah on the day that we're getting ready to sort of commune with the Lord, as it were. So we don't have to be worried about that particular possibility. So what they're saying is, and therefore maybe we do have to be worried about that some priest will show up, because that is not nearly as unlikely as Elijah showing up and disqualifying and requalifying the bread that you disqualified. They're being funny. The sages are being funny here. Okay, so where am I? And then so anyway, so they did not move from there, right? These sages that were arguing with Rabbi Yehuda, they kept that argument going until what's his name? Elazar ben Yehuda. Rabbi Elazar ben Yehuda of Bartoda prevailed over them and established, where am I? And they established that the law is like Rabbi Yehuda. That bottom line, we can eat chametz until the 4th hour and not beyond. Period. End of story. And that this particular other Mishnah also is like that. I'm sorry. And they established this halacha that when the 14th of Nisan falls on Shabbos, we burn the chametz. We get rid of all the chametz except for 2 meals worth on the 13th, on Friday, and that includes consecrated teruma for priests. And if there are no priests around, we burn that on Friday as well, even though it's the 13th of Nisan, and we would be sort of cutting off the time when a priest might have eaten that consecrated bread, because they're not going to make a law taking into account such far-fetched possibilities as were named here. Moving on. The Gemara notes, hold on a second, and then further proof is brought from a different incident. So there was another incident. As Ravin bar Rava said, there was an incident that occurred involving a certain person. Now, what this incident is going to teach us, it's going to be brought in the context of until what time in the morning on the 14th of Nisan we can eat chametz. But what we're going to end up learning from this story is how important the sages deemed it that we avoid not only improprieties, but even the appearance of impropriety, right? If we're doing something that we know is kosher, that we know is legal, that we know is okay, but it's going to appear to others like we're doing something that's not okay, that is a behavior that we want to avoid. It can hurt our own reputation. It can hurt people who are connected to us and who believe in us. And it can even lead others astray. And so like a classic example of that was brought in that daily email from the online Daf Yomi, My Jewish Learning. They mentioned it today, that, a Jew who wears a kippah, right, who's a visible Jew, is going to be, wary of entering a non-kosher restaurant to use the bathroom, right? It's not that you're not allowed to do that. Of course you're allowed to enter the non-kosher restaurant to use the bathroom. But if you're dressed as a visible Jew, a guy wearing a kippah, let's say, and somebody else sees you enter that restaurant, he might think, either this guy's a hypocrite who eats non-kosher food even though he wears a kippah, or maybe that restaurant actually is kosher and I didn't know it. Right? And so it's going to create this sort of conflict of ideas, appearance of impropriety, and that's something we'll be wary of. We're not really going into that situation right now. If you had a baseball hat, it would be better. People don't want to take off their kippah, but there's an emergency, you have to go to the bathroom. I mean, how are you going to handle that situation? We're not going to resolve that situation right now, but it's the same issue is at stake. Here's how it happened with respect to chametz. So there was this incident where a certain person deposited a saddlebag filled with chametz, with leavened bread, with a man named Yochanan Chakuka, and mice bore a hole in the bag, and leavened bread was spilling out of the sack. And he came before Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, on Erev Passover, on Erev Pesach, to ask what he should do. Now what's interesting is, I don't know what the fact that the crumbs were coming out and a mouse bore a hole in the saddlebag actually has to do with this. The problem is he's holding somebody else's saddlebag. That's the real issue. That's full of chametz, and it's on the 14th of Nisan. So he came before Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi on Erev Pesach, and he said to him, what should I do with this bag of chametz? And Rebbe said to him, well, wait, because the owner of the bag may yet return and take it from you and eat the leaven, right? You don't want to remove the leaven, destroy the leaven, or sell the leaven to a non-Jew, which is something we can do to remove leaven from our possession on Erev Pesach. But you don't want to do that on his behalf when it's still the time that he could be eating it, right? So don't do anything yet in the first hour of the day. In the second hour, Rebbe said to him, wait, right? He came to Rebbe in the second hour. He said, should I sell it to the Gentiles now? No, wait. In the third hour, Rebbe said, wait. In the fourth hour, he said, wait. The fourth hour is the last hour when it's permitted to eat chametz on the 14th of Nisan, per the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. In the fifth hour, concluding that the owner of the saddlebag was not coming, Rebbe said to the person who was holding this other person's bag, go and sell it in the market. Now, what did Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, what Did Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi not mean that Yochanan Hakuka should sell this leaven to Gentiles in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, who says that it is prohibited for a Jew to eat leaven during the 5th hour? So if you're prohibited to eat it, can you sell it in the 5th hour? That's the question that's being asked here. Rav Yosef said, no, it could be that he meant to sell it to a Jew in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir, right? So Rabbi Meir says we could still eat chametz in the 5th hour. So maybe Rabbi was saying to this guy, go sell it to a Jew, because a Jew is still permitted to eat it, right? Once it's not permitted to a Jew, you can't sell it to a Jew. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was simply advising, but actually Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was simply advising him to sell the chametz quickly before the 6th hour begins, when all agree it has to be out of our possession, at which point it would be prohibited for Jews to eat it. Abaye said to him, if it is permitted for a Jew to eat leaven, let him take it for himself and pay the owner back later, right? During the 4th hour, the guy who's holding the saddlebag could just sell it to himself. In other words, he could buy it he could set his own money aside, purchase the saddlebag, so now it's his chametz, and then when the time comes to sell it or burn it, he's going to then have it to get rid of, and he did that on behalf of his friend who left the bag with him. Now, we actually had this question a few weeks ago. Somebody in our audience asked, well, what if you have somebody else's chametz, another Jew's chametz in your house? Can you sell it for them? So here we see that apparently, yes, you can sell it for them. But the Gemara responds, eating it himself is not an option. So maybe maybe this is why the mouse hole in the bag was relevant, because there wasn't that much chametz left in it. And so he could have bought it himself, eaten it, and now there's no more chametz. And so, neither he nor the one who deposited with him owns any chametz once it's no longer permitted to own chametz. But eating it himself is not an option due to the potential of suspicion, meaning appearance of impropriety. As it was taught in a Baraisa with regard to a similar situation, collectors of charity who have no poor people to whom they can distribute the money change the money with other people and do not change it themselves, i.e. with their own coins. Right? So if you are somebody who's been entrusted to distribute charity to the poor, and there's no poor for you to give it to, so then what are you going to do with that money? You could just, sort of put it aside in your own pocket and you'll distribute it later, but they're saying that might look like you're stealing the money that belongs to the poor. So rather, you have to, in a very public way, change, in this case, it was food that was given to this person to distribute to the poor. There's no poor to give it to. The food's going to go to waste if it just sit there and it goes stale. So rather, it should be exchanged into money so that because the money will keep, obviously the money won't spoil, and then later that money can be used to buy food again and distribute it to the poor. So he could just buy that food that was collected to give to the poor with his own money and then eat it with his family. The money that he paid for it is set aside, and he can use that to buy food to give to the poor later. But they're saying don't do that. Don't do that because it might look like you took advantage of the situation to buy, this charitable food at a discount price. Rather, go to a public situation, sell the food for the poor to someone else in public so that it can be witnessed that a fair price was given and that money is set aside for the poor, and there won't even be the appearance that you might have done something wrong, right? You have to go out of your way when you're a public official or a charity collector, somebody who's entrusted with goods or food or anything on behalf of other people. You must go out of your way to avoid any appearance of impropriety. Likewise, collectors of food for the charity plate, who would collect food in large vessels for the poor to eat, who do not have poor people to whom to distribute the food, sell the food to others and do not sell it to themselves, as it is stated, and you shall be clear before God and before Israel. From the Bamidbar, the book of Numbers 32:22. Right? You have to be clear of wrongdoing before God, who sees everything, and if you did it honestly, God would know that you did it honestly, but also before Israel, right? Before the nation. You have to look like you have to not only be honest, you have to look honest before in the eyes of the nation. All right, I'm almost done. So if you have comments and questions, get them in there now. Okay, and then the last thing we'll just mention here, that the last part of the Mishnah that we've been discussing said, Rabbi Yehuda said that when the people had gathered for the pilgrimage, everyone who was able to get up to Jerusalem for the pilgrimage festival of Passover, and they were all gathered around the Temple Mount, right? And they were going to bring their offerings to the Temple Mount to be slaughtered in the afternoon, but they can eat their chametz right through the 4th hour, neither eat nor burn during the 5th hour, and at the beginning of the 6th hour, they all burn their chametz. And Rabbi Yehuda said that there were 2 loaves of bread. They were disqualified loaves, loaves left over from all these offerings that were brought by pilgrims coming to Jerusalem. And sometimes there are loaves of bread that accompany certain offerings, Thanksgiving offerings. The first source of these loaves of bread that's offered is that they are loaves of bread that only priests can eat those loaves of bread, but so many Thanksgiving offerings are brought at the temple on the 13th of Nisan with all these pilgrims flowing up to Jerusalem that all that bread couldn't be eaten. And so since it couldn't be eaten by a priest, no one else can eat it. They're going to use it for this signal to the people of when it's time to stop eating chametz. But then they say, no, actually, those loaves are burnt, the ones that the offerings were brought on the altar, and then the priest just can't get around to eating them. Rather, they're the loaves that are left over because the animals that they were supposed to accompany were lost. At any rate, on the morning of the 14th, they had as a signal on the Temple Mount, 2 of these loaves were placed on a sort of high place where they were visible to people in the crowds below. And so when these 2 loaves were up there, and when they took 1 loaf away, it meant that the 4th hour had passed, and we could no longer eat chametz. And an hour later, they would take the 2nd loaf away, and that was the signal to the people that now the time of burning the chametz had begun, the beginning of the 6th hour. Now, that's not that visible of a signal, right? There's 2 loaves of bread sort of high up on a pillar on the Temple Mount. It doesn't have to be that visible because, the crowds are assembled in Jerusalem and the buzz will get around like, hey, they took the first loaf out and, pass it on to your neighbor and everyone will quickly hear about it. But they actually did have a more visible, has this microphone been over-modulating? I'm sorry. So they had a more visible signal. They had 2 cows that were plowing on the Mount of Olives. So if you've ever been in Jerusalem, the Mount of Olives cemetery, right, is behind the Temple Mount, rising up above it. It wasn't always full of graves like it is now. And so there was a field up there, and they would have 2 cows plowing. Now, you might say, well, wait a minute. I thought, that most people don't work on Erev Pesach. They're busy getting ready for Pesach. So who is plowing on the eve of Passover? And these cows, it wasn't really a field up there. It was just, like symbolic plowing. So there were 2 cows that looked like they were pulling a plow, but not really pulling a plow on the Mount of Olives. And when they took 1 cow away, that was the signal, no more chametz. And that could be seen from a greater distance. And when they took the 2nd cow away, that was the signal, and now we burn the chametz. And so there was the visual signal to the crowds assembled in Jerusalem about when the time of chametz ended and when the time to burn the chametz had arrived. Okay, let me check. Questions or comments? Dory Cohen. Please pray for my brother approaching major heart surgery this Monday, also a diabetic. Oh, Dory, may your brother be healthy and well. May this procedure be a complete success. We should only hear good news, and he should have a complete and speedy recovery of all ailments. And we say amen. Bill, Well, that's very helpful of God and Elijah. Oh, they're busy. Let's wait until tomorrow. I don't know why, but I find that humorous, deeply charming, and strangely moving all at once. And I would say that you summed up my feelings about it perfectly. I agree with you. Tom says, but aren't we supposed to pray that Mashiach comes speedily and not tarry? Absolutely. We are supposed to pray for that. He should come as soon as possible. But we don't control when he comes. And we've simply been assured that he won't come on a Friday, on Erev Shabbos, or on Erev Yom Tov, the day before a holiday or the day before Shabbos. It's not in our control. Elijah will come when Elijah comes. We've simply been told it won't be on Friday or the day before a holiday. Rhonda says, this is fascinating. As a young woman many years, it bothered me that the Talmud teachings seemed off limits to women. And here we are. And there's lots and lots of women in this audience and asking great questions. And we're all learning together. And thank God we have that opportunity. Okay, that's all the questions that have been passed to me. You should all have such a sweet, sweet Shabbos. We are in the period of our annual campaign, so if you appreciate what we're doing and you want to partner with us in sharing the light of Jewish wisdom with the whole world, you can donate, donate.accidentaltalmudist.org. Particularly if you're interested in dedicating our learning on one show of AT Daily to the honor or the memory or the healing of a loved one, you'll find information about that at the link, donate.accidentaltalmudist.org. And you should all have a really sweet Shabbos.